Mont Saint Michel is one of those places that everybody has seen somewhere, be it on posters or be it on cards, but not many people know where it is or its history, or even less people have even been there. It is truly one of the treasures of France, and if ever you get the opportunity to visit, I really recommend that you go there. Leap and myself were sitting in the Chicorée Cafe in Arras, planning our pilgrimage to Mont Saint Michel. I would love to give these guys a bit of a plug. They are very friendly, with magnificent service, reasonable prices, and just a great place all around. So Mont Saint Michel is some 435 kilometres from Arras and 357 kilometres from Paris. I did unfortunately miss a turn and finished up in Le Mans, which added another 169 kilometres to the journey. But I do not regret this because I've always been interested in the car race there. For those who may be interested, the Chicorée Cafe is located in Rue Sarthe-Vert, Arras, and the particular brand of beer they sell there is Stella. And let me warn you, it's rocket fuel. I don't think I could handle any more than 3 or 4 of them without getting very silly. And another word of warning, particularly for Australians that do travel to France. In France, they do not fill your glass to the top. This would be an insult in Australia, but it's the way they do things in France. We had an early start and made our way through the ducky streets of Arras and very quickly reached the motorway. We were heading to the region of France called Normandy. Whenever I think of Normandy, I think of the grand luxury liner, the Normandy, which was the pride of France and competed very strongly with the Queens of England, both Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. However, suffered an unfortunate incident during World War II where it was docked in New York for safety, caught fire, and the exercise was mismanaged. The ship sunk and was cut up for scrap. After some hours of driving, the little Fiat required refueling, and it was my first experience with French service stations, which are unmanned and work purely on your credit card. And I found that only service stations on the motorways would accept my credit card. This was a big pain in the backside, to say the least. Back on the road again, and Leap was upsetting me with his rap music, and I was upsetting him by missing turns, and we finished up going to Le Mans. Just like Mount Panorama in Australia and Bathurst, Le Mans is a street circuit, and while I wasn't wrapping around there in a Ferrari, the Fiat is in the same family, and it never hurts to daydream. The 4-hour journey finished up taking 6 hours, and when we arrived at Saint Michel we could not resist having a peek before finding accommodation. After our quick peep at St. Michel, it was necessary to find some accommodation, and this was an almost impossible task. One of the places we tried was Kerishoma at 42 du Rue St. Michel, and these people were amongst the kindest people I met in France. They said that they had no accommodation to offer. We went all around and we were preparing to sleep in the car, but of course we wanted something to eat. So we returned to the restaurant, now in darkness. They asked us where we'd found accommodation. We said that we hadn't, and we were going to sleep in the car. They wrote us a note and gave us an address, and we indeed did find accommodation. Wishing a good meal, we returned to the restaurant, and they were closing, but they were quite happy still to serve us. Although not cheap, the food there was absolutely sensational. We had oysters and a delightful meal, and these people are really deserving of a plug. This is the correct way to treat people, and it is sheer kindness. And if ever you go to Mont Saint Michel, then have a meal or stay with these people. After a simply fabulous meal and a beautiful night's sleep, we parked the car and started walking towards the monolith, which is Mont Saint Michel. It almost looks like something out of Disneyland or from Fairyland from a distance. And it's hard to believe that we're walking towards a place that has been in constant use for more than 1,000 years. While walking there, I was surprised to find a pillbox left over from World War II. During that period of time, Mont Saint Michel was inhabited by the Germans, and thankfully they done no damage to the structure. It's very hard to find any documentation relating to that. But Mont Saint Michel had known its times of tragedies. In the 1500s, one of the structures there suffered a major collapse, and in time it was repaired. Mont Saint Michel's status as an island is somewhat questionable. I guess what you would truly call it is a tidal island. But it was once linked by a road which has now been removed, and there is a raised walking area. But previously it was even possible to catch a train there. As you make your way up the resin walkway, you are very surprised to see an old piano. A piano that is left there for members of the public to play. And during my time there didn't seem to be one person who played it who didn't know how to mash out a tune. And then very quickly the fortifications in St. Michel become visible. The ramp walls were put there in the period of the 100-year war. At different times, all of Normandy was under siege by Britain, although Mont Saint Michel never fell. The British really wanted it, so much so that on nearby Tumberlane Island they constructed a fort. And it wasn't possible for me to go there, but I believe there are still ruins of the fort as well as the dungeons still in place. And Mont Saint Michel was under siege for 30 years, surviving that siege. To this day I don't know how in earlier times they managed to get water. Maybe they relied on rainfall or something like that. Anyway, before I go any further, have a look around. me, after that lot, you'd want to know more about the history of the place. And just as a bit of curiosity, in the 2 days I was at Mont Saint Michel, I took over 1,500 photographs. So let me share with you the history.
The story of Mont Saint Michel starts in this way. The legend of the Bishop of Avranches and his visions. Saint Orbit, the Bishop of Avranches, founded Mont Saint Michel in 708, after having seen the Archangel Saint Michel appear in his dreams 3 times. It was after this third and final vision that he decided to have an oratory built in honor of the divine persona. But where? A bull attached to Mont Tombe was the sign Saint Orbit was looking for. He thus decided that Mont Saint Michel was the place. During construction of the oratory, the Bishop of Avranches sent 2 religious dignitaries to look for the relics of Saint Michel. They brought back a section of wall and a red cape, as well as a piece of marble, on which the Archangel had placed his fort. Mont Saint Mich had tumultuous times in the Middle Ages. The Abbey of Mont Saint Michel would become a place of worship, prayer, and pilgrimage over the years. Benedictine monks, who have been there since 966 and translated Aristotle's texts, and the relics of Saint Michel, attracted the faithful in search of spirituality. The Abbey's strategic location also made it a target. Extensions made to the Abbey were coupled with the reinforcement of the island's defenses. One can see the vestiges of the 100-year war during a visit, and in 1204, the Abbey was attacked by war-hungry Breton knights, acting under the command of Guy de Thouars. The Abbey and its prisons. It was under the reign of King Louis XI that Mont Saint Michel became France's version of Alcatraz. Transformed into a detention center, it took in prisoners until 1860. The French Revolution locked up dissidents and put them in holding cells located in the Abbey. When the prison closed a century later following an imperial decree, the 650 prisoners were transferred to the continent. Victor Hugo, an ardent lover of the Abbey, was one of many who called for the prison's closure. Renovating Mont Saint Michel. The worship grounds were restored in 1922, but it was in 1966, during the Abbey's 1,000-year anniversary, that pilgrimages came back with force. The French government, owner of the Abbey, managed the renovations that took place. The Benedictine monks again set up in the prayer halls, but would bit by bit neglect the Abbey. The friars and sisters of the monastic fraternity of Jerusalem came to the Abbey in 2001 and have since organized daily celebrations. Mont Saint Michel today. To make access easier for pilgrims, a road built on an embankment was constructed in 1879. In 1983, a project to restore the maritime aspects of the island was begun. However, the project is now seriously questioned as it provokes sand buildup. The parking lot was removed and an access constructed on pillars was built, thus allowing the English Channel waters to flow freely. As for the old road, it is being progressively eroded by the incoming water.
One of the macabre facts about sainthood is that the body is exhumed. And in the Basilica of Mons sits a beautiful case in which is the skull of Saint Orbit, or Aver in French. And on examination of that skull there is a hole, and there is a legend about that when he was receiving his visions, Saint Michel touched his finger on his head, burning a hole through his skull. However, if you're not one to believe such legends, a medical examination showed this hole to be an epidermoid cyst. The geology of where Saint Michel is too is also amazing. It's on the location of a former mountain range known as the Avor Massif. And through some process I don't properly understand, magma come up from the earth, forming a pool, and the softer sheath over time eroded away, leaving the granite rock today we now call Saint Michel. Another amazing feature of Mont Saint Michel is its extraordinarily high tides, up to 11.4 metres. And the clay pans there form quicksand and is a place where you don't want to get stuck in the mud. The construction process of Mont Saint Michel happened over a period of the 8th century to the 19th, and buildings were built on top of buildings, even concealing a secret church which today is off limits to the public but can be viewed. Looking at the layout of Mont Saint Michel, you'd almost be forgiven for thinking it was a maze. Let's go for a bit of a walk around. After making my way up the medieval mall of shops, I walked towards St. Peter's Parish Church, Pierre in French. As you approach the church, you notice that Joan of Arc is there on guard duty. And then when you get inside the church, it's somewhat confusing. It seems to be more dedicated to Saint Michel than Saint Pierre, but nonetheless it is a place of beauty and quiet contemplation. I lit a candle to my late mother, likewise lit a candle to his late grandmother, and sat there in quiet contemplation for some time before moving on. There are a range of different museums on the site, or musée as they say in French, and all say one of them are covered by one fee. The one that is separate is the fee to visit the monastery. And one of the displays is about everyday life. I can imagine there would have been a class structure, although there's no proof of that, but it looks as though they lived pretty well by the displays. where they slept, where they ate, how they bathed. One surprising feature, and something I'd heard about but never seen before, was a chastity belt. And what an evil looking device this is. I don't know how the ladies would have attended to their hygiene needs when wearing such a thing. Stories are abound, but it is said that when the nights went off, they give the key to the chastity belt to a close friend, and sometimes the friend unlocked the device. What the history is to this one, I really can't say, but it boggles the imagination. Another museum is also dedicated to the maritime history. I believe that it reaches somewhat beyond the island, showing maritime skills, knots, so on and so forth. Other than getting grounded, I can't believe any of these sailing ships would have been able to sail up to the island, but who knows what's possible. There even appears to be a royal barge on display, and to the distaste of the French, the English always had a superior navy. Napoleon was much troubled by this. Spread out across the site are a range of glass cases holding a large number of treasures. I will draw your attention to this one that is filled with medallions. Medallions could be for a range of purposes. To denominate rank, you would give a medallion to your lover or friend. And you can see by the wide variety, it could even be possible that the medallions were used to show a level of education. And in yet another case are seals. Seals are somewhat old-fashioned in these days, but a seal was very important for the security of a document. It could tell you if the document had been opened. It could tell you the authority of the document. Like if you got a letter from the king, it would have a royal seal on it. It also clarified the identity of the person who was sending the document. And in yet another case is an endless amount of keys. Can you imagine the number of locks and keys that would exist upon the island? It would be simply horrendous. How you keep track of it, I have absolutely no idea. But the history of the island goes on way back before human habitation. There is a range of fossils that have been found, and I would believe that the clay pans would preserve things very well. And in one of the cases is a Stone Age axe made from a piece of bone or a rock. I'm sure that it has a fascinating history. And some artifacts were left by Romans and taken from Rome. And in a surprising twist, there is a cabinet filled with ancient pocket watches. I didn't think the French were known for watch manufacture, but I may be corrected on that one. In one of the rooms there is an arrangement of strong boxes. France never had a King Henry VIII to steal from the monasteries. But what is particularly impressive about one of them is the locking mechanism. Would you get a load of the incredible complexity of this lock? It's simply amazing. The weak point would be the box itself, not the lock. Before we went up to the cathedral, there was a lift in place to take supplies up to the cathedral, and it is a truly impressive structure. And right next to the early one is a modern one. The difference is that the modern one works electrically, where the early one would have had a monk running around in a cage like a mouse. And as you look at this cage, you can see there's not much room in there, and if something went wrong, it could be quite drastic. And it's a hell of a pull coming up to the monastery itself, so there would have been a great deal of load. And things would have been put in place on this cart, as you can see, with the little wheels, and then pulled up into place. Another interesting feature is that the island features a cemetery, and I believe that you can be buried there. I'm not sure whether or not it is a permanent burial or whether or not you will be removed after a length of time, and it would probably cost a great deal of money. But it is interesting to go for a walk around and look at the graves. There are a number of models of the construction of Mont Michel. Notably, the same winch design which is used for moving supplies up and down was also used for the construction of the project. And it was quite a long-term construction project. And then when you make your way up to the monastery, there is a model of the now completed Mont Michel. A magnificent model though it is, it in no way compares to the magnificence of the real thing. As you climb the endless stairs, the views become more and more magnificent. But at the end of these stairs, or to the limit of where the public can go, you can realise that you're nowhere near the top, with the top of the monument being some 93 metres. And it is topped by Saint Michel himself. Interestingly, the gold leaf image had to be refurbished, and the only way in modern times they had to replace and remove the statue was with a helicopter. So how was this done in medieval times? Despite Mont Saint Michel's many incarnations, it is principally a place of worship. In the lower museums you see mannequins of medieval monks busily at work studying and meeting the medical needs of people. As you move up towards the monastery, you must pay to enter, which is quite reasonable because there's quite a lot of expense in maintaining it. Upon entry, you see a magnificent rock carving in segments of Saint Michel delivering his message to Saint Yver. And then you make your way around a cloister. It's an area where the monks would have walked around in circles and prayed in contemplation, glaring up at the enormous bell tower and spire. And there is a foyer heading into enormous refectories. In the period of time when the island was a prison, I could imagine that there were bunks and things set up in there for the prisoners to sleep in. And it is serviced by gigantic chimneys, which would have been used to keep the place warm, because I'd imagine it gets quite cold in the winter, and to cook food on. And get a load of the size of the chimney. The draft up this chimney must have been enormous. And there is also quiet corners where people can pray and take their time. Well, in religious times it would have been the monks who prayed there. But finally we entered the main prayer hall, and we were lucky enough to be there in the period when a service was being undertaken. But shooting a video is forbidden, but we were allowed to take still photos of the event. Saint Michel is known as the Sword of God. So you would imagine that any major monument dedicated to him probably would have some violence attached to it. The natural aspect of Mont Saint Michel makes it very defendable. It is an area that is highly tidal and surrounded by quicksand, and it was in use in an era when most people did not know how to swim. The fortifications were built upon. Now they're a thing of beauty, but in the past they were a thing of violence. The ramp walls were put in place for the 100-Year War, with the principal protagonist being England constantly attacking Normandy. The island itself has 3 major doors that an invader would have to pass through before entering the structure, with the final one having a drawbridge and a moat. Around everywhere you walk you see ambiguous slots which would have been used for rifle fire and bow and arrow fire from a defendable position. There are cannons placed today in different spots around the island, but in the period when it was used there would have been numerous numbers of them. And in one of the museums there is a great display of small arms, as well as suits of armour, swords and spears which somewhat appear to be decorative. There is a turret of gun ports in one of the areas because a lot of the invasions during the 30-year siege were land-based, with a clever little pit, so if ever it was breached you'd simply push your enemy into the pit, surprising the hell out of them. Also around the site there is a number of well-structured observation points to see an invader of some nature before they arrived. The history I looked at is not clear, but the monks left the monastery. Whether it was because they were sick of the endless violence, maybe they were bankrupt, or maybe they feared someone like King Henry VIII moving in and stealing from them, they left. King Louis turned the monastery into a prison. And this was a result of the French Revolution, whereby normal people took issue with the aristocracy. It's quite ironic, but a few of my family members were part of the French aristocracy. My surname is Nichols. The French spelling of my name is Nicholas. And during this period of time, we left France and moved into England. Well, that's my shot of trying to show you 1,000 years of history. Mont Saint Michel is an incredible place. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and please hit that like button. And there's a lot more to come.